What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So, UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Rodriguez is in the books. Pretty good card. I'm just going to go over the main card here, the results. A couple of good fights, a couple of them, kind of shit the bed a little bit. We'll talk about it. But Andre Petroski versus Rodolfo Vieira. Andre Petroski won that by unanimous decision. It was actually a really close fight, but it's 29-28 all across the board. But Andre Petroski wins that. That's kind of what we thought it was going to be. You get two guys who are mainly grapplers in there. They kind of chose not to test that. Each of them had a couple of attempted takedowns, but the other kind of popped right back up. And it was, a kickboxing match. And to be fair, it wasn't too bad, considering it was two guys that typically grapple. So it wasn't bad. Each of them landed some good strikes. The first round definitely went to Petroski. Vieira started coming back in the second round. They were each landing some good leg kicks, good 1-2s here and there, a couple of good jabs. And then, so I gave the first round to Petroski. I gave the second round to Vieira. The third round was really, really close to me. I honestly was not sure if they were going to give it to Petroski or Rodolfo Vieira. Petroski did get a takedown the very last moment, so I think he maybe left that lasting impression in the judge's eyes that tipped it in his favor. But either way, Petroski got a unanimous decision over Vieira. Nazim Sadikov defeats Ismail Bonfim by TKO, doctor stoppage, at 5 minutes of round one. He took a pretty serious question mark kick um, on into a little later in the very first round, and you could tell it hurt him. But it's one of those things you thought he was going to be able to recover from it, but then he goes back to his corner at the end of the first round. At some point throughout that process, the doctors kind of got involved. He wasn't really all with it, and by he, I mean Ismail Bonfim wasn't all with it. And somewhere within that process, the doctors, coaches decided he could not continue. Something he said something about he couldn't see, or then they said that he said he could see, and he kind of protested it. I'm not sure exactly what took place, but I do know they stopped it in between the first and the second round, and Bonfim was not able to come back out, which I know sucked for him because his brother was on the card earlier in the night, and he actually got the win. At least one of them got a win. So yeah, Sadikov advances over Ismail Bonfim TKO in the first round. Moving on up the card, Edmund Sabazian defeats Dylan Budka by TKO strikes at 135 of round one. This is pretty quick. Listen, Edmund Shabazian is a banger. Very hard puncher. I called this one. I figured that Edmund was going to beat him. And that's what happened. Dylan Budka, I'm pretty sure, has had 3 fights in the UFC and has lost all 3 of them at this point. So not sure what's next for him. Not saying he's a bad fighter, but that's obviously not a good start. 3 fights in the UFC, you've lost all 3 of them. But anyway, yeah, Edmund Shabazian gets him out of there. Just a couple of minutes into the first round. So TKO strikes. What can you say, man? Edmund Shabazian's a tough dude at middleweight. He hits hard. He's not scared to put himself in the pocket and go hard in the pocket too. He's one of those guys that feels comfortable with taking shots on his own. And he's just always kind of been that way. But yeah, he ends up winning that fight, Edmund Shabazian. Moving on up the card, Yosef Zalal defeats Calvin Kattar. I picked Calvin Kattar on this. I underestimated the striking of Zalal, I believe, and it's because his last 3 fights he's won by submission. But with that said, it's not that I'm mad that Zalal won, but I'm a little bit disappointed in the way he won. He racked up on points kind of in the first and second round with just lots of movement, tons of lateral movement. He stayed on his bicycle most of the fight, kind of pumping the jab and the 2, and then, throwing kicks whenever he had a chance. Fair enough. He was able to kind of stay away from anything impactful from Calvin Kattar, but then, he was getting in a couple of shots and then immediately back on the bike. back and forth. What I didn't like about it is he clearly had the first 2 rounds in the bag, but then he was clearly just kind of coasting to the decision. And I don't know, man. I just don't like it when guys do that. And, I'm not a fighter. They are. And I'm not going to sit here and hate. It's just one of those things where it just makes you feel some sort of way when you see a guy resting on his laurels like that. He knew he had the first two rounds in the bag, and because of that, you could tell he purposely was just running back and forth. I mean, there were periods of time in that third round where he literally was just evading, running almost with his back towards Cater. And at that point, Cater knew he had lost the first 2 rounds, so he was really trying to go after him. And, Zalal just wouldn't engage with him. But with that said, that's just as much Cater's fault because he shouldn't have waited until the third round to try to get in there and force the action and make something happen. He sat there and, just kind of nonchalantly chased Zalal around the octagon for 2 rounds, knowing that he was probably down on points and significant strikes. And then Calvin Cater waited until the third round, when there's only a few minutes left in the fight to really try to get in there and go after the guy. But at that point, Zalal was just on his bicycle. He was just pedaling, running, trying to stay away from anything impactful, which he did. I mean, Calvin Cater landed a few good shots here and there, especially in the third round. But, you know, nonetheless, he ended up losing that 29-28. 2 rounds for Zalal, only 1 round for Calvin Cater, and that was obviously the third round. So, yeah, Calvin Cater's defeated by Zalal. I think I didn't give Zalal credit for the fact that prior to his last 3 fights, which he won by submission, he's a striker. And I haven't seen a whole lot of him because he's not been in the UFC the whole time. He's been in the UFC, then out, and then he's come back. So, I think I underestimated his striking. Really good, solid striking, good movement, good lateral movement from Zalal. And to be fair, it wasn't his best performance, and he said that in his post fight interview. But to be fair, he did what he had to do. Very elusive. Kept good movement. He would throw his strikes, but then he was out, whether it be to the left or the right. Strikes out, and then he was moving, and he never sat his feet long enough to really give Calvin Cater a chance, to come in and land anything impactful. So it ended up being Calvin Cater kind of chasing him the whole time. And then when he finally get to him, Zalal would, get off his strikes and then start moving again. So he just stayed on the move quite a lot. Used his movement really well. Unfortunately, it wasn't the most exciting fight. When you get guys who do that, it's just not all that exciting. So he won it. Not the most exciting performance, but you know, Calvin Cater is a veteran. Calvin Cater is good boxer, good striker, but he's more of a straight on, march you down, and wants guys. If he can get a guy who is willing, like Giga Chikadze, who's willing to just crash in together with you, he usually will win that. He's got real good lead elbows. He's got spinning back elbows, Cater, that he'll use, including boxing in close. He's really good there. But he's shown to have a problem with guys that really use that lateral movement well and aren't willing to just crash head to head with him. And that's what we saw here tonight. Zalal just wasn't going to do that. Very elusive, moving the whole time, barely stopped. And again, I wasn't a fan of the third round. Zalal was definitely running and coasting, almost refusing to engage. But that's just as much Cater's fault for not getting more work in the first and second round. All right. So anyway, Zalal wins that. Moving on up to the main event. This is when I got it wrong, but I'm kind of glad I got it wrong. I like Jared Cannonier. Got one in for the old guy. I'm in my 40s, so it's good to see 40-year-old guy like Jared Cannonier, who's a real martial artist, a good all-around, MMA fighter, and who's been at it for quite a while. Top contender floating around in there at the top. I mean, he's not won the belt, but he's always been in the top 10. He's always, a top notch fighter, and he's had some really close fights with some of the best in the world. I was glad to see him get over this hump tonight. First round was looking very shaky. Rodriguez has massive power for that middleweight division. He's such a huge dude. I mean, when they were standing beside each other in the weigh-ins, Jared Cannonier was literally like doing this with his hand, like, holy shit, this guy's big. He absolutely is. Massive guy. No telling how much weight he cuts to get down to that middleweight division. But not only that, he's a jiu-jitsu guy, is Rodriguez. But he's learned to strike, and he has really, really good power. He's one of those guys that throws everything in to every punch. Really dangerous power at middleweight, and Jerry Cannonier saw that a couple of times in the first round. I mean, Jerry Cannonier was landing his shots as well, but he got dropped a couple of times. Luckily, they were quick, like flash knockout sort of things, and then he came back too. But yeah, he was dropped to the mat at least twice in that first round by Rodriguez. I was very concerned at that moment, but he survived it, made it through that first round. Second round rolled around, and you kind of noticed immediately, okay, Rodriguez looks like he's got a little less pep in his step now, a little less pop in his punches as well. I mean, he's still dangerous and he was still throwing, but you could tell that he's not used to 5 round fights. Got 10 knockouts on his record, and a lot of those are first round sort of finishes. And I think that when he knocked down Jared Cannonier, he kind of blew his load a little bit because I feel like he thought that he was going to get Cannonier out of there. So kept going in hard, kept swinging for the fences. Jared Cannonier, being the experienced veteran that he is, was able to survive it. Second round came around. You could tell Rodriguez didn't quite have it on him anymore. I mean, he was still dangerous, still throwing shots, but he was already starting to tire. All right, so Cannonier, I felt like won the second round. He was starting to kind of pick his shots, find some shots on into the third round. By the time they got into the third round, it was Cannonier pretty much starting to take over at that point. Okay, they were in the clinch position, and Cannonier finally caught Rodriguez with a beautiful quick elbow on the break, got him right across the jaw. Rodriguez dropped straight to the mat. Cannonier followed him down there, landed a couple of strikes, and that was it. It was over with. But it was one of those where Rodriguez was hurt at the end of the third round. Jerry Cannonier caught him with several good punches, had him up against the fence. Rodriguez barely survived the third round. It was one of those where the bell saved him. If that round would have been 5 seconds longer, Herb Dean probably would have waved it off. But he was saved by the bell at the end of the third round. But coming out at the beginning of the fourth round, Jerry Cannonier, you could tell that his corner talked to him, was like, hey, this dude's done. It's a wrap. He's hurt. Go ahead and go in there and get him out of there. And that's exactly what Jared Cannonier did. As soon as that fourth round started, he was on him, just coming in, swinging, hitting him with whatever he could. Good popping straight jabs, coming over the right, hit him to the body one really good time, and that kind of caused Rodriguez to shell up against the fence. From there, he just kind of weighed in on him. Rodriguez just wilted up against the fence onto the mat, and Herb Dean stepped in, waved it off. So really, I'm glad I was wrong on this one. It's good to see the veteran, who using his his octagon IQ in there. Really, really good win for Cannonier. Plus, that was a really good, entertaining fight too. Really good fight. And no shame on Rodriguez's half. I mean, he had a lot of moments in that fight as well. I mean, even when he was tired and getting winded in the second, third round, he was still having his moments where you're like, ooh, you knew the whole time that Jared Cannonier had to be careful, because if he got touched too hard and too clean by that guy, he can put guys out. Extreme power. I mean, and not a bad, boxer, to be fair, to for a guy who has a jiu-jitsu background and who's that big, very decent striking, Rodriguez as well. So anyway, Cannonier got him out of there, man. I'm glad I was wrong on that one. Very beginning of the fourth round, and yeah, that was for me. That was the highlight of the main card. Really good fight. Let me know what you guys thought of it. Subscribe to the channel if you would like the video, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.